our teachers as soon as possible. Our teachers have done a lot of work in terms of how do we support curriculum that ends up in our hands by making sure students are good thinkers, they're good doers, and they can also perform on an assessment that gets published, and it's how we measure our success. So I think it's possible. I don't know how popular it would be but yeah.
How long have we had this current curriculum?
This will be our 7th year. That's our typical cycle that we run on, yeah.
Was the math previous to this cycle any better? Test score wise?
Well, that I can't speak to as much. I don't remember what we had before we had the Engage New York, but I also know that our system of testing, OSAS, has changed significantly since before, in the last 7 years. So I can't say that it is, or I can't say that it isn't. I could go back and certainly look at scores and tell you, like, if there's a place where our scores started to look a little bit different or look different than the rest of the state, or if it's kind of a consistent trend across the state. I don't know that. I could find out.
I'd just be curious to know if we had a time frame or a certain curriculum where scores were better than where we're at now. Seems like this has kind of been a plateau or a decline. I don't know which year over year if that's true, but I don't know if there's a way to go back and see if there was something previous that, I don't know if it's, the basics were missing. I don't know what is causing our scores to be low, so.
I mean, I could guess some, but the guesses we're not here to have a guessing. So I can look into that for you.
You're right, it would be guessing, but to your point, Jessica, the state controls the curriculum. The state controls when we teach, what we teach. They don't control the classroom, but they control the alignment of when we teach. And then they make up the assessment, and they administer the assessment. So how, if they control every element of it, can we continuously have, scores in the mid-20s of kids meeting benchmark? That suggests the problem isn't the curriculum or the instruction. The problem is something in the way the state is administering the assessment. I can't prove that, but you can connect dots. So, as we're aiming toward replacing curriculum, apparently because testing isn't working, maybe we should be replacing testing, not replacing curriculum.
Right.
I mean, the only evaluation of whether your kids know math is when they graduate, can they do it?
Have you looked at writing a curriculum with our math teachers that might step above the bar that Scott's referring to at the 20%?
Well, we haven't looked into that. I mean, I think that as teachers, you always take a curriculum that you purchased or that is given to you, and you have to make adjustments every day anyway with the students and how they perform. And so teachers do sort of, I wouldn't say writing curriculum, but they do a lot of adjusting based on the kids who are in front of them. But no, I have not looked at writing a math curriculum. I can tell you that in talking to publishers or in talking to curriculum writers, that is it's a monumental task to do in a short period of time or a long period of time.
I guess just further information. I don't want to rush teachers that aren't comfortable, obviously, in things that they've piloted, and if we're not getting scores or as low as Scott's saying, I don't know what the answer is either, but it just seems like we're pushing our adoptions, and then maybe we're in a boat where we need to make a choice, and maybe we're not making the right ones. I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this, Carrie. Would you agree with this statement? I think there's only 4 things that can be failing when you're not achieving scores. Your curriculum is failing, your instructors are failing, your students are failing, or your assessment is failing. So of those, I mean, those are the four things that would go into leading you to a failure. One of those, one or more of those is failing, right? Well, I don't think that the curriculum necessarily is failing. It seems to be there. The instructors, I don't have any criticism of our instructors and their instruction styles.
No.
I know our kids are trying. So that leaves me with one,
Yeah.
which is the assessment. And it's statewide. So it's not just here. If it were just here, maybe it would be instructors or students.
Right.
But if it's everywhere, and it is statewide, that sure suggests the state assessment system is at fault.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to fix a problem we can't even diagnose because we don't know what's wrong with the assessment system.
Well, like, you don't have control of it.
Right.
Are
would
these
agree
the
with you.
assessments that you can opt in and out of, that we only have 30% of our students currently taking?
Yeah, at the high school level, those are where we have the biggest opt-outs. So a K through 5, parents can opt their kids out of any state testing at any time. That's a right that you have with you and your student. But most K through 5 parents don't opt their kids out. And most high school parents do opt their kids out. That also creates, when you look at testing scores across the high school, that creates its own problems when you only have 24 to 30% of the kids taking it. It's just not accurate numbers data to tell you whether or not kids know math or not. And kids are passing their high school courses. They're getting their credits. They're graduating somewhere. They know their math, and they're not just learning it when they get to high school. There's a lot of foundational skills that come up from kindergarten all the way through. So they're learning math. Our students are learning and doing math. Any other questions about curriculum, or do you want me to talk about the early literacy grant? Ready? Okay. It's the thing you've been waiting all night for. The early literacy grant first came to my attention last spring. It's in the process. Actually came to fruition with House Bill 3198. So this is a legislative House bill that was passed July 30th. With House Bill 3198, it's called the Early Literacy Success Initiative. The state of Oregon, governor, legislative, they really wanted to put funding towards K through 3 specifically, early literacy, and there's some pre-K through 5 years old, and there's some community grants as well. But the one that we're most concerned about is the public school and the charter school K through 3 focused early literacy grant. So it's a grant that I'm currently writing it, actually 98% of the way through it. We're working on a budget. We're working on what are our priorities. For this grant this year, it's called the Jumpstart Year. So really what this grant asks is like, how are you doing? What are you doing? Where are things that you are doing well? Where are areas that you would like to focus in these 8 areas specifically? And so a lot of the process has been going through those 8 areas and saying, how are we administering assessments to K through 3 kids in writing and reading? How are we progress monitoring them as they come in and as they move through their early literacy? How are we providing curriculum that gives them the scope of not just phonics and phonemic awareness, but building vocabulary and writing? How are we making sure that, good readers become good writers and the connections between that? So without going into, a million hours of details, the early literacy grant, the due date is January 8th. And this is a grant that the application needs board approval. So at the next board meeting, I will be bringing that early literacy grant application to you and asking you for approval. And it does come with a budget. So some of those budget areas or some of those priority areas that we are looking to spend some of that money are in a literacy teacher at Steens Pillar Elementary, We also have a high dosage certified teacher that is splitting some time between Barnes Butte and Crooked River, taking some kids in very small groups or one-on-one. Call that kind of our tier 3, or our third dose of instruction for some kids who are struggling. We would like to do some training, some science of reading training for our K through 3 elementary school teachers. I would like to do some training, science of reading training with a lot of teachers, but this grant is specifically for just K through 3. And that training is through the Eastern Oregon University, and then as well as maybe providing some supplementary curriculum for our new staff that we would like to pay out of this grant.
Carrie, I saw that the grant had the foundations curriculum. Was that a supplemental? Did you use a supplemental curriculum for the K through 3? Was it? Could you explain that a little bit? Was it phonics based, or what was? Why did you want that for the supplemental material?
So Foundations is currently what we have. We adopted Foundations at the same time we adopted Great Minds and we adopted Geodes. So they came as a package deal, with the Foundations being our K through 3 literacy, very diagnosed, very structured, very, can't think of the word. It's given a very good scope and sequence for our K through 3 literacy, from, alphabet, sounds, phonemic awareness, phonics, all the way through 3rd grade, in developing foundational literacy skills. So that's what Foundations, can be confusing, that's what Foundations is designed to do. And so teachers are instructing in Foundations every day at the K through 3 level. And so it is currently, we might consider it a core, you might consider it a supplementary. I go back and forth. It's core because we do it every day, and it's a pretty prescribed curriculum in order to get kids those foundational skills. But some people would say, well, maybe it's a little supplementary because it's not our core, because we're also using our Great Minds or our Wit and Wisdom as our core with reading and writing as well.
Are the teachers seeing improvements? And have they just been using this just this year?
Yeah, so they started using Foundations last year. This is our 2nd year with it, because it was adopted at the same time. Would say that maybe not last month, but the month before, I brought you kind of the one pager that showed some test results as compared to some assessment data, and that DIBELS data, which DIBELS is the dynamic indicators of basic early literacy, and our K through 2 scores show a lot of growth in where kids are from the beginning to where kids progressed to the end. And I would say that most teachers that I've talked to say that it's because of Foundations that is showing that growth. And not that other programs were bad, we just didn't have a prescribed literacy curriculum before that.
Carrie, there's a lot of research that shows that the best way to move kids toward literacy, really young kids, is to do a lot more reading with them, the reading aloud, especially if they're reading where they have high competency and like maybe they know 90% of the words, but the last 10 they have to struggle with, that can really help. Cheyenne has pointed out at this table and multiple times that we only have smart reading at Crooked River right now. And maybe we would benefit from having more smart readers or programs like that in the other elementaries to help get more reading capacity for kids. Is your strategy looking at anything like that?
So strategies, there is definitely one about both community partnerships and parent partnerships. That is one of the things that we report on. And so we do start to see that we have some different things in different buildings. Smart readers are at Crooked River, but I do think that there are some partnerships that are taking place at Steens Pillar and Barnes Butte, but maybe within, like 5th graders reading to kindergartners, or some after-school clubs, supporting their youngers in after-school clubs. Not sure why Smart Readers just is at Crooked River and not anywhere else, but we definitely have to talk about how else are we getting kids outside of school time, hearing more, listening more, developing their oral language, having people read to them.
And Carrie, what is the difference, or what is a high dosage tutor as opposed to an aide or?
It's a good question. And that's one that we have kind of been asking. So a high dosage tutor is different than what you see in the grant. They talk about intervention specialists or intervention coaches. Intervention specialists or intervention coaches are a lot of times helping to support classroom teachers, knowing how to deliver this curriculum, or knowing when you get a kiddo who seems to be, struggling what to do. But a lot of our intervention specialists also do small groups, but the high dosage tutor is really that third tier. A lot of times there is a one-on-one. So they take a kid who's had core instruction, tier 1 instruction, along with their grade level peers. They are looking at kids who've had that tier 2, so that one extra dose through what we call our RTI process, and still they're lacking or they're below grade level. So high dosage tutors are really looking to support kids who are below grade level, even after grade level instruction and even after a tier 2 support. So they work one-on-one.
So are we looking to add the reading interventionists at Steen's Pillar because we don't have one, and then the high dosage because we already have the interventionists at Barnes Butte and Crooked River, or why aren't we adding them? Why do you have it split between the elementaries, I guess?
Yeah. So Steen's Pillar did not have a reading interventionist. So when we started looking at the fact that we knew that we were getting this grant, that was a high priority for me. And the reason why the other 2 schools had it is because they are Title I schools. And so Title I schools receive federal funding for focus on reading and math, but primarily reading, to help overcome some of the barriers of poverty. And Steen's Pillar does not have that designation, so they did not end up with a literacy or reading specialist or interventionist in any way. So that was a priority for me. And then the high dosage tutors are our person who's doing one-on-one. We are splitting because, because both Barnes Butte and Crooked River need a place or a person to be able to give that one-on-one, that high dosage, that tier 3 instructional support. So that's where we started.
Any other questions for Carrie? Thank you, Carrie.
Okay, you're welcome, and I will see you guys in January with that application.
Anna, we'll move on to you for our SIA grant.
Thank you. We have the SIA grant agreement in front of you in your packet on 5.3. The SIA stands for Student Investment Account, and this is a grant that has been in place since 2019. Most of our grants that we receive don't have a requirement for school board approval, but the SIA grant has just a lot of extra levels of additional school board approvals because this grant, it was kind of like legislatively created different from all the other grants, and so it just has its own requirements. So the agreement that you have in front of you is for the current fiscal year, so it's just for 23-24. So as you know, 23-24 is already well underway, and we've been operating with all of the normal things that we pay out of this grant, and those things are, there's no secret on those, and we have reports and things on our website. So basically, we're just asking you tonight to review this grant agreement, give it a board approval, and then we can actually start claiming reimbursement.
Is this a yearly grant we do since 2019, Anna? Or
It's biennial,
okay.
but the grant agreement this time is, actually I think every year they give you a new grant agreement. And then I think the reason they do that is because the dollar amount could change the second year, just depending on a lot of factors. So they just do 1 year at a time.
I move to adopt the grant or move forward with it.
Second.
All those in favor of adopting the SIA grant, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. And this grant agreement is posted on our website if anybody wants to read through the, however many pages this is.
You want to move into childcare, Anna?
Number 5.4 is, this is not a board action. I'm not asking you to approve anything. I just want to make sure that you're aware. This, just kind of how this topic came to be and what I'd like to do moving forward. I think it was a little over a year ago, there was a new grant that was given out to school districts for employee retention and recruitment because school districts across the state are struggling with teacher shortages and staff shortages. So we met with representatives from the employees and came up with what types of things do we think are barriers to getting employees and keeping employees. And one of the big topics that came up was that childcare is very difficult for people and it's a barrier to employment. We actually know that we've lost people who either accepted a job and then couldn't find childcare and then had to not start working here, or that had to quit because they didn't have childcare. So we used part of this grant that we received last year to start the process of remodeling a modular building here at the high school. And then we also received another grant from another donor that helped us to continue remodeling that building. In the meantime, our plan was, as we were moving forward, is we were planning for this just to be another operation of the district and to have somebody within the district do the planning, do the supervision and all of the operations of this childcare facility. And for one thing, our staff we just don't have the bandwidth for managing this. And then the second thing is we keep hitting roadblocks or speed bumps. It's just really difficult for a school district to try to take something like this on and make it happen. And then if you think about, well, let's hire somebody to do it, then you're spending money, but it takes a long time to get it going, and so you don't have any revenue to offset that. And so we've come to the place where we really think that we need to just allow proposals for an outside company to come in and actually just provide the operations of the childcare within our space. So in the end, we still get what we need, which is the childcare for the recruiting and retention, but then we don't have as many roadblocks and issues with trying to operate it ourselves. So my plan is to actually just put out a request for proposals and see what we get. We won't be obligated to accept anything or enter into any contracts with people, but we can just kind of see what's out there as far as interest to do this and see what people want to propose. And then basically just kind of move forward from there. So I don't want to do something like that without the school board knowing. You'd see a request for proposals and wonder, what are we doing, especially with childcare, which is not part of our core operations, not something that we have had before. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity to object, ask questions, give me input, and then, assuming you're okay with it, I'll move forward.
So Anna, this would cater for teachers first, district employees that need childcare.
That would be the idea. District employees would get priority or preference for childcare, but that it would be open to the public as well. And then the other thing is, if we had any parenting students, they would get priority first.
Do you have a general idea of a number that would be within the district that would be taking advantage of it? Just, as a guess.
A number of children.
Well, staff that would be taking care of it or taking advantage of it or in-house using?
We do have an idea. We did a survey and it had pretty good interest, but then once we started to really try to operate it and we didn't know who the employees were going to be and what, we just didn't have enough information. We didn't have any staff response at all. So I think staff really want to know who's going to be caring for my child before they sign up for something like this. They want to know who the people are. So it's kind of an unknown right now.
Do you need anything from us other than just to inform us?
That's all I need to make sure you're informed.
And I have a question. What's the size of the building? Like how many children could it house?
So we have a couple of different spaces, and I believe in one of the spaces we could hold up to 22, but it depends on the age of the children as well. So if you want to start adding infants in, you have a lot fewer. Even if the building is big enough, you are only allowed to have so many children in the space. So we're shooting for about 22. Does that include events? Infants? No, not at this time.
That is a building total, public included. I mean, if we had one and the public had 21, or we had 21 and the public had one, the building capacity would be 22.
We were looking at ages 3 to 5. But again, we could, if someone from outside wants to operate it and they want to have infants, it'd really be up to them, so.
But if you had infants, you'd have to have a separate room for those
Yes.
infants, and you need a 1-to-4 ratio, which would
Yes.
pencil economically well.
Right. Depending on the price, yeah. And then, again, we're not childcare experts, we're child education experts. So, yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to 6.1. You again, Anna.
So you may be wondering why the CFO is bringing a weapons in schools policy. And the reason for that is it really, it was kind of a bigger conversation, and it had to do with insurance coverage and a lot of different components of just sometimes we continue operating and doing all these things and trying to do as much as we can for students, and then something comes up and you say, oh, I think we might have an issue. And so I'm the insurance person. And so I've been in touch with Pace Legal, our insurance agent, and our HDSD, High Desert ESD attorney, trying to figure out, oh, and some Pace attorneys as well, just trying to figure out if we have everything covered. Because we have a couple different student groups that handle weapons and they are school district approved activities. So once we went through a whole bunch of review, it boiled down to there was one little piece in the policy that specifically said, superintendent may authorize other persons to possess weapons for courses, programs, and activities approved by the district and conducted on district property. And our students that are involved in these activities participate in activities that are competitions in other locations other than district property. So what this boils down to is we need to just strike that, and we did have legal make sure that it's legal for us to strike that from our policy. And so I thought for efficiency's sake, we would look not just at the policy that we have now, but what was the most recently recommended policy from OSBA. Because when OSBA gives us recommendations for policies, we don't always get through all of them right away, or, you know, we kind of always have a backlog of policies because it takes a long time to get through policy. And so my proposal tonight, the most important piece is that highlighted strikeout on the second page. All of the rest of the language proposals come from just the most recent OSBA update. So I personally, I think it's probably smart to always look at OSBA's recommendations, because usually those are based on changes in law. But I really need that strike out there just so that we can be compliant with policy for those student groups.
Anna, does this policy cover our ROTC?
Yes. Okay. And I think we put this on the agenda tonight not as an action item, because we wanted to give you time to digest all of this and just make sure that you could ask questions or make suggestions or comments, et cetera. And then we would bring it to you in the future to see where we want to go with it. So I'm not asking you to make changes tonight.
So if we have anything that we would like to see corrected or just clarification, just.
Yeah, you can ask it tonight, or you can
Well,
email me and I'll
I'm
look
fine with
into it.
It's just a bunch of little stuff, and some of those paragraphs to me
Yeah,
didn't make any sense.
I'm going to be the point person on this policy.
So, okay, I can visit with you about it
Okay,
and just
okay.
look for clarification in parts and pieces.
Okay.
And this would cover, in addition to all of CCSD managed properties, would this not also cover the Powell Butte Charter School, since that is district-owned property but not operated property?
It would cover our activities on charter school, any other property. The charter schools have their own policies.
So this says, shall not possess, conceal, or use properties on any property under the jurisdiction of the district. What does jurisdiction mean? I'm just suggesting you might want to clean
Yeah,
that up
that's a good-
before the next draft.
Okay.
Those were the things that I was looking to clarify and clean up. There's a lot of little one-offs that just kind of make you wonder, what does that actually go to?
This is great. This is the input I need. So I will look more into that.
So as Anna said, she'll be the point person for this, so if, as you're reviewing, please shoot any questions, comments, concerns to Anna, and she'll clarify, revise, and bring back a copy at a future meeting. Anything else for Anna on that policy? Okay, thank you, Anna. We will move on to the permanent superintendent. Right now, we have a community survey that's up on our site. I believe they're going to put up here for you to see. We put out a press release about it. We have a link on the website. We're asking for any and all community involvement that we can get moving forward, so we have as much community involvement or information moving forward with our timeline. And there is time to take the survey. If you don't have time now, it's open till the beginning of January. Dr. Yucca, do you have anything else to add? Okay. Scott, we'll move on to 7-1.
So it's easier if I just tell you the story of how this came to be here. So I got this text yesterday asking me if the board were going to announce the candidates and the process for appointing people to the finalist selection committee for the superintendent search. And I answered back and I said, there is no finalist selection committee. There's a committee
Correct.
to recommend to the board the
Right.
finalists, but the selection of the finalists rests with the board.
Right.
And my texter texted back and said, Dr. Yucca told me that this is a finalist. This committee will be selecting the finalists and then forwarding names to the board to select from among them. So I talked to Dr. Yucca today, and it sounds like there is some confusion about this. My understanding from the beginning has been that we were appointing a 15-member committee, and it has representatives of different groups that we talked about, including the classified and certified union and parents and hopefully some students. Those names are being gathered up through the community survey as volunteers. We will eventually see them and make whatever appointments we make to come up with 15. And then that committee will review the resumes and give us feedback as to whom they think should be appointed. The board will also be reviewing the resumes, and out of that process, after receiving the recommendations from the reviewers, then the board will select the finalists for interview. I think that's what we're doing, but I'm now not sure there's clarity around that. So I wanted to ask everybody where we were.
That was my understanding, was that we had a recommendation committee that was to review applications, all applicants that had come in, and write their recommendations to give to the board. That was my understanding.
Scott, my understanding's the same as yours.
Jay Weeks, are you out there somewhere? I'm just wondering if you can add anything to this conversation. You've been in a lot of communication with Rob Hess, Dr. Hess. Is there anything you can help us with or add to this conversation, please?
Yeah, in conversation with Rob Hess, the understanding that we have is the same as the board is discussing now. That 15 members, a screening committee that provides a recommendation on who they might want to see interviewed, and that comes back to the board through the screening, and then the board would then select who to interview.
You have to turn on your mic, Steve. Sorry. It's okay.
But it wasn't just from that pool that they, I mean, it's still just the recommendation, I guess, what would be their pick? I don't know if I said that right, but.
So the screening committee would see all the resumes, basically, that came in, and then there would be a process that they go through to evaluate each one on the same standards through the entire process. And then Rob Hess leads that process through with the screening committee as well as the board to then determine who the board would want to take to that first round of interviews. So who makes the cut from screening to actually sitting before the board for an interview. That's what the team of 15 is recommending to the board on who they would want to see, but the board ultimately makes the decision of who comes to the interview.
And I believe the other piece we talked about when we did the setup meeting and all of this, was that we would have some sort of instruction, formal instruction for the 15 members about how to be confidential and not discriminate and all the other important stuff that goes into reviewing. And that's still on track to happen, right?
That is correct. And Rob Hess will be doing that instruction.
So the other question, Madam Chairman, just for the general public, is when are we going to be making those appointments? Are we planning to do that at the January regular meeting or somewhere else?
So I haven't clarified with Rob, but my understanding was it would be our January meeting because the survey closes on the 5th, and our meeting is the following week, that Monday. So that was my understanding. I can clarify with Rob Hess, though, but as far as I know, things are closing just before those following board meetings.
You might want to discuss with Rob and with Jay where that would put us on the schedule. If we wait till the third Monday to make those appointments, we're getting very close to the point where we actually are supposed to be starting the interviews, which would not leave you enough for the reviewing. So,
Eric, can you bring that scheduled timeline back up at the bottom of that page you had? The survey closes the 5th, and then we have an appointment window. No, I'm sorry. We can appoint the committee, but the application doesn't close till the 20th. So our screening can't happen until after the applications close, which is that January 20th to February 2nd.
so that's 13 days total to notify people that they've been selected and get them organized and get them trained and then start. So it's a tight timeline. If it can work, great.
You think 15 days,
So-
we're gonna need more? Because really, you're selecting the committee after the 5th, but the candidate screening, we could start anytime roughly after the 20th. So how many days are you thinking you need to?
Well, I'm just trying to square it with the board meeting time, which in January is what?
The 8th.
Oh, yeah, okay, we might be okay.
So I think we're gonna
Well,
be.
no,
okay.
because you can't, if the 8th, applications for board, never mind, that works.
Okay. Rob was thinking the timeline would still be okay as well.
Tight,
Yeah.
it'll work.
Depending on how many applicants we have total will also be a factor in that window that we'll have to look at once the process itself closes. I believe we have, correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, 5 applicants right now?
That was as of early last week. I haven't gotten an update for Rob
Okay.
from the weekend and moving forward.
So as of right now, we have 5. Rob thinking that Christmas break, we would see an influx, if any, for applicants then. So this timeline is flexible, we can definitely work with as well. So, any other questions for Jay, Dr. Yucca? No? Okay. Thank you, Jay. Anything else for the search process, Scott? Is that it? So we'll move on to policies for review and adoption, and actually for just discussion, sorry. So policy EFA, local wellness. Looks like we have Leland and Denny.
All right, so at the last board meeting, when the board was reviewing this policy and the other policy, there were a lot of questions that kind of came up. Some of those were actually about the National School Lunch Program. So we wanted to touch bases on some of that stuff. Now on the agenda, it shows 7.2.1 and 7.2.4. Those were documents that we provided for the board, just for information. We weren't planning to do any kind of presentation on those, but we can answer questions about anything you have, okay? We are scheduled to get a major nutrition services audit this spring. This wellness policy is something that's very important to that audit. And we have to follow those National School Lunch Program guidelines in order to pass our audit. So, the other thing that this policy does is it covers everything that we would need to cover to get rid of the AR that's associated with it. So we could actually remove that AR, and the policy it gives us enough to work with. And that's a suggested OSBA recommendation. So and Denny's here, he can answer lots of specific questions about the meal patterns, anything that's on those documents. He works in that every single day, so he's the expert on those.
Denny, I think one of the questions I had was, how is this does this like change our nutrition a lot? I mean, does it change how you guys do the lunches and everything? Or is it just like everything's gonna kind of stay the same? Nothing's really gonna drastically change? I mean, how's that look for you guys?
So nothing will change in the lunch program. We just have to adapt to what the ODE and USDA put out, yearly, every 6 months. We have to adapt to those sorts of things. But the way the wellness program would be held would allow us to do that automatically through the ODE guidelines. So we would be just moving right along.
So it's not anything, I mean, no major changes to lunch programs?
No,
You're
there
still
wouldn't be
gonna- I
any.
mean, you don't have to change out this food for that food
No,
because
no.
of calories or anything like that?
No, we would not.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman, I looked up, according to our cover page here, we have to adopt this because of federal Title VII CFR 21031A. So I looked up that code and I read it. And what it says, among other things, is that each local educational agency must, 1, permit parents, students, representatives of the school food authority, teachers of physical education, school health professionals, the school board, school administrators, and the general public to participate in the development, implementation, and periodic review and update of the local school wellness program. And 2, to inform the public about the content and implementation of the local school wellness policy and make the policy and any updates to the policy available to the public on an annual basis. And 3, to inform the public about the progress toward meeting the goals of the local school wellness policy and compliance with the local school wellness policy by making the triennial assessment as required. So if we rush forward and we adopt this tonight, where's that public process coming in? Because I see a lot of names in there that aren't sitting at this table.
So I would say that we are in our 3rd year, essentially, since the last time we did anything with this policy. So we're in that process right now. But by the time the audit happens, we're still going to be working through that process. So I believe we do need to get the committees together and start doing that stuff. But it's going to be completed by the end of the school year, which would be after our audit point. And then we can readopt whatever they decide at that point.
So we adopt a new policy and then we ask some committees to tell us what they think of what we just adopted?
Well, that's not my wheelhouse really as far as policy goes, but yeah, I mean, to me, it would make sense to have somebody look it over the next 6 months. We can invite people in now and try and rush through it and get people together. We could definitely do that and see if we get it in time before our audit.
When was your audit, Denny?
It's going to be the 16th and 17th of April.
Of April. So we probably do need to,
I think you ought to have
Look at-
some sort of public
right.
process before we adopt this. I mean, even if you hold a community meeting and make sure all those people are there and take their
Right.
input meaningfully and give it back to us next month or 2 months or whatever it takes, that would be, I'd rather do that than have no process. I don't think you're going to survive your audit without some process.
That's perfectly fine. This is, again, not my wheelhouse. I don't really
Right.
establish these sort of meetings and groups to write policy. I just implement the policies that you provide me, really. That's how the process goes.
Leland, do you have a form of meeting that kind of checks those boxes already in place, or?
We could set something up and actually start gathering that committee. We'd have to go out to the public, and the public is the biggest challenge, but we could advertise that and get public members to be on that wellness committee. So I can actually start working with that. We'll probably the district has a wellness committee, and I think Nathan Yuma does a lot of that stuff, so I could work with him to try and make sure we check all the boxes.
Okay.
Denise,
Go ahead.
I was concerned if you know where the food comes from. Like, where do we get all of our food from? Who sends it in? And I'm just worried about the nutritional content. I have some concern about, lab-grown food and some different hot topics that I see around, and I just want to make sure we're providing the best nutritional, the best nutrition we can for our kids.
Sure. Currently, our vendor is U.S. Foods. We're on a bid with a co-op of 38 different school districts, so we essentially serve the exact same products that 38 other school districts do. We get about $110,000 of commodities from the USDA. I don't know the source of the farming or any of those sorts of things with those particular products, but we do get the foods from U.S. Food that do meet the meal pattern. So that's kind of where it ends with we don't search for GMOs and stuff like that at my level, I guess, but we could definitely try to do that moving forward, but that's not something that they provide us. We just meet the meal pattern that the USDA dictates to us.
Yeah, I guess my main concern is just finding out the exact source of the food. Who are the food companies that are sending it? Is my concern. Is there a way I could find that out?
Sure, I could send you a copy of our bid. There's about 800 items on it, and it's General Mills, all sorts of different major companies that provide us our food.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
So Denny, I just have some questions within our schools. I've heard talk from some of my younger kids that maybe the salad bars are a little different at each school. Is that so? Do you have salad bar at one school and not at another, or do you bring the same foods to eat? Like, is the meal the same at each school?
At the elementary level, the meals are exactly the same. There could be day-to-day differences based on produce quality. If we get bad peppers at one school, they're not going to serve peppers when another school might, but there's no major differences between the elementary. When you get to the high school level, there is essentially quite a few more items put on the salad bar at that level.
But each school has a salad bar,
Yes,
essentially?
it does. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Do you have anything, Steve? Anything else, Jennifer?
No, I agree with Scott. I think, you got till April for your audit. I think there's plenty of time to get and you get Cheyenne's, a lot of questions answered also, so.
Leland, you just, maybe I could put this as maybe a follow-up next month, and you kind of tell us where you're at and if you need any form of aid or help. I don't know how pressing your days are, so.
I can do that.
Okay. So any other questions in regards to EFA. So I think, Leland, we'll hold off on the AR as well for removal till we go through the rest of the due process.
Look on the bright side, Leland. You can now point to 2 school board meetings where we've talked about this in public, so there's public involvement.
Thank you, Denny.
So Leland, you're also listed for our medication. Oh, thank you, Denny, sorry. Leland, you're also listed for our medications policy as well.
Yes. So a lot of the changes from the old policy to the new policy are well, this is the AR. Most of those changes are directed at naloxone. So naloxone, a lot of people refer to it as Narcan. Narcan is a brand. And just some background on fentanyl or opioids in general. Fentanyl particularly can be, if you're not an opioid user, a very tiny amount can actually put you into an overdose. So the danger with it is if it happens to show up in a school in a powder form to where it could be inhaled or absorbed through a cut in your skin, you could overdose. So providing Narcan and Zimhai, I'm going to talk about two different drugs, providing that in the schools. The policy is very clear about making sure our staff are trained. All the staff that would be trained to use naloxone would have CPR and first aid training, and then a specific training on using both of those 2 products. One of those is a nasal, one of those is an auto-inject. The nasal, they're both 4 milligrams of drugs. The nasal can be like half of that, depending on how it's administered, can be absorbed into the nasal passage. So you only get like half of the dose. So it just depends on how it's administered. The Zimhai, it's a full 4 milligrams. So if you give somebody Zimhai and they don't come out of it, you're not supposed to give them another injection of Zimhai. With Narcan, the nasal spray, you can actually give them 2 or 3 different doses to make sure you get enough into the system. I think I covered pretty much everything. So Jefferson County, Ben Lapine, and Redmond have all adopted the use of naloxone in their schools, and they're currently using those. And I think that's about all I really have to say. I'm open for questions on it. There was also a change on the storage, which I've actually talked to Wendy Perrin, and we will make sure that the food's not being stored in the same refrigerator with medications.
Okay. So that was one of my questions last month, Leland. And then the other one was the reported to building administrator. But then like in the emergency response, we added district nurse, but it only lists principal. So we just, I'm just worried the verbiage doesn't necessarily match up, but my concern is this isn't who necessarily is trained in it. So I don't know if we could look at wording in something with, those that take the training. I don't know how to word that correctly, but I don't know the process and the reporting, and so having somebody that's not trained or hasn't gone through the training to then be somebody you report to, how would that work?
So we're willing to train anyone. Police department, county health, both have agreed that they could provide the trainings. So we're okay with training anybody that wants the training if they're comfortable with it. If a principal is not comfortable, then we're not going to train them to do that. If there's an error in administering any of the medications, then it's supposed to be reported to the building administrator as well as the nurse, and I can't remember, and possibly somebody else. I can't remember.
Parent and guardian.
Yeah.
After that, so, yeah.
But if you want me to change some language in there to clear that up, I can do that.
I just didn't want a building administrator to, possibly be on the hook for something they aren't trained in, that's all.
Yeah.
So if the reporting process would be the same for any medication, then I think the wording is fine. I just want to make sure that one of our administrators that maybe isn't comfortable with administering Narcan or doesn't go through the training is not then left responsible for not following a reporting procedure. And maybe that's the same for all medications. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, can you tell me where that's at, that wording, if you have it?
Page, yeah, it's hard because it's not always the same on the computer, but it's at the bottom, it's 5-8 on my paper copy. Well, it's the any error in administration of a medication will be reported to.
I see it as section,
So I'm not,
oh, yeah, where'd that go? Section 6, or yeah, 6F. 6A1F.
thank you, Steve.
Any error in administration medication will be reported.
Okay, I can work on rewording some of that.
Well, is our reporting the same for any error, any medication error? Is this being changed because we're adding the Narcan?
That's for any medication errors.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I don't think the verbiage would need to be changed then if all reporting is the same, sorry.
Leland, my understanding that part of the urgency of this policy is that we've already got police officers carrying Narcan with the ability to do it. And so we've got a policy saying this may not be allowed, and we've got people with it who would be saving lives with it, and we would like to make sure that everybody is protected appropriately under the policy. So that's why we have limited access through trained and licensed people, and not just everybody. But we need to bring everybody into conformance. And it was just coincidentally, it was interesting today that the Oregon Health Authority announced they would distribute Narcan and the other one that starts with a Z,
Oh,
to all the school, any school district that wanted it. So that there's obviously some interest in doing this at the state level, and they've judged it to save lives, which does seem to be the evidence.
they put it together, there's a whole program and a kit, I can't remember what it's called, Oregon something. And you get some of the medication, you get a locked cabinet for it, you get posters, you get all kinds of stuff. And I've started the paper to apply for that. As soon as we pass the policy, I'll submit it.
My questions from last meeting were answered, so I don't know if anyone else had any lingering questions.
So this isn't labeled for action. Are we adopting this tonight, or where are we at? What is this?
So I think it was up for discussion due to our last, well, it's under the link, all of these are under possible action, and Leland was trying to clarify verbiage with the questions we had last month, which he answered my two. I had the question on storage and then the reporting. I don't know if anyone else brought questions forward that Leland might have missed.
So this isn't going to, this last policy was updated in 2022, so the only changes in it is to just add the Narcan.
I think the changes were the information about Narcan and the storage of medications, I think was the only thing in red there. I think the reporting stuff, the building administrator, district nurse, and parent guarding, that's new. And then documentation on an incident report, that's new. And the storage.
Why are you seeing 22, Cheyenne? It's saying 20 at the top of the policy.
I think she confused.
Oh, I was looking at the,
Oh.
So the only thing that's changed on this, just make clarification, was just the Narcan and that program around it.
Yes. Your policy, everything that's in red, it's pretty much mostly all associated with Narcan.
Madam Chairman, I move to approve policy JHCD/JHCDAAR.
Second.
All those in favor of adopting JHCD, JHCDA, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, well, there you go, Leland. Thank you.
Thanks, Leland.
And Dr. Yucca and Scott, a reminder of the committee appointments made in July.
Yes, 7.3 has board committee appointments as a discussion item. And we have a 7.3.1 piece of paper there for you to review the current assignments, decide if we're up to date and what direction we might want to head if we have any changes whatsoever.
I think there might be some questions within the committees. I know, like I'm on the AP and Senior Year Opportunities Committee, which I
Right.
don't know anything about, but was interested in because I have kids coming up through high school. So,
I asked Dr. Yeka in a regular meeting the other day where we were with the meeting of the committees, like that one. And apparently, when you ask a question, you get punished by getting put on the agenda for it. So that was the genesis of my involvement with this. But I was asking, and I'm still asking, if we have the committees, particularly the AP committee and the bond committee, when are they going to meet? What are they going to do? Why do we have these committees if they're not moving forward? Because like you, I haven't been to an AP committee, Senior Opportunities Committee, and I doubt you guys have had a bond committee. So I'm not sure how we get staffing assigned to these to do the logistics of calling them together. Maybe now that we have Tammy, that becomes Tammy's job. But somebody somewhere needs to start this ball rolling.
So maybe this month we can meet with Dr. Yucca and report back in the January meeting where we are. Jennifer and I are on the bond committee,
Right.
so we'll go over with him the details and the rubrics for how we set that up and what was done in the past, and start doing that. Does that sound like a good plan? Report back at the January meeting.
There's also a work session on the 22nd
Of January.
of January, yes.
I think Dr. Yucca's saying report back at the work session. I guess, Scott, I'd need some direction in who actually forms the committees and, I mean, who specifically would be on them? Or
Well-
do we just ask in general like we do with the long-range facilities and those things?
We probably want to ask Dr. Yaka to bring us a proposal to the work session for those fleshed out committees and how they're going to be staffed. And then that can be developed and worked out. The AP Senior Opportunities Committee already had a membership. The bond committee, we're starting over, so that has yet to be determined.
Dr. Yucca, did you get that for the work session? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, anything else, Scott, for that? Okay, Dr. Yucca, anything else on that? Okay, Anna, we'll move into your finance report.
Thank you. We have your finance report in the packet as usual. There's a graph on the very first page, and if you look at the November bar there, you'll see that that revenue jumps up in November, and that's normal. The reason for that is that property tax revenue starts coming in. So our state school fund is one of our biggest revenue sources in here, but that's spread throughout the year. But the property taxes, a really large chunk of property taxes all comes in at once in November. So that's why you see that jumping up like that in November, and then it'll just continue to if everything goes as normal, it'll just continue to steadily increase from there throughout the rest of the year. Our revenue projection is about 1% over budget if you look on the third page. And then our overall projection for our general fund is that we'll do a little bit better than normal and, better than budgeted, which is normal, and we rely on that. So there's nothing really of concern or anything to bring to your attention right now on the general fund. But then if you move to the page, it's a couple pages back. I'm going to just hold it up for your, so you can get to it. It's at the top it says Student Investment Account Fund 251. There's 3 funds on here. 251 is the SIA grant that we talked about earlier with the grant approval. The second 2 things on here are ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. And really, these were of great interest when, when ESSER was newer. ESSER 2 is now completely spent out, finalized, claimed. It's completely done, reported and everything. So that can eventually just drop off of this report. And then ESSER 3 is pretty close to being done as well. The only thing left to spend out on this one is the monthly payments on the modular buildings at the middle school. So just every month, there will be a monthly lease payment that we make out of ESSER 3 until it's gone. And it has to all be spent by September of 2024, and we are on schedule to do that. So really, these 2 funds there won't be much activity from here on out. I just want to let you know that, because eventually we can just kind of get rid of that off of this report. Does anybody have any questions on the finance report?
I don't think so, Anna. Or maybe people are still looking. I think people are still browsing.
That was all I had on the finance report. Thanks.
Any other follow-up for Anna on the finance report? Okay. Thank you, Anna. So for upcoming dates, there is an executive session on December 18th at the district office. There is no school December 18th through January 1st for winter break. Our next school board meeting is January 8th of 2024. That is 6:30 at Crooked River Elementary. And then we have a work session scheduled for January 22nd in hopes of working on our strategic planning. Anything else for anyone else? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.